And good evening, everybody. I'm Ann Vandersteel, and this is Steel News. Most of you know that I live in Florida, but many of you may not be aware that Florida is facing a pivotal moment. From skyrocketing property taxes and housing pressure to rising insurance costs driven by lawsuits, from insufficient healthcare choice to education systems under strain, our families are paying the price. For too long, too many reforms have been talked about but not delivered. That's why tonight's guest is so significant. Paul Renner is someone who says he has not only the vision, but the record. A U.S. Navy veteran, former state prosecutor, attorney in private practice, legislator, and Speaker of the Florida House, he stands poised to step into the governor's office and set a new tone for Florida's future. We'll be discussing specific reforms, the ones that matter and the ones that can't wait, in areas that affect your wallet, your home, your healthcare, your children's education, and your job. Over the next few minutes or so, we will dig deep. What will it take to roll back property taxes? How do you end insurance litigation spirals? What does health freedom look like in practice? Jobs, better wages, all without adding taxes or regulations. What is real reform in education, AI? And how does global competition reshape our workforce? These aren't vague promises. These are about results. Get ready. This is going to be one of those conversations where ideas meet implementation. Let's bring on Paul Renner. Paul, it is great to see you. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm looking forward to bringing you up on the stage. And for whatever reason, my StreamYard wants to be difficult. It's great to see you again. How are you?
Great to be with you, Ann.
All right, we have a little bit of a connection issue, but we will work through it. So thank you so much for joining us. You really do have a very long and varied background. I'm going to play at the end of this interview a clip that comes right off your own website talking about your background in the Navy and what, from your perspective and what your supporters see as a vantage point. But you do have a very varied background, a veteran, prosecutor, legislator, Speaker of the Florida House. Now you're running as the candidate for governor of Florida. What drives you now, and why is this moment the right time for you to step into the governor's race?
Well, we don't want to go backwards, and I've got a lifetime of leadership from age 23, being on the deck of the USS McInerney during the first of two wars I served in, navigating through mine-infested waters all the way through to Afghanistan 20 years later as a state attorney and a speaker during two of the most conservative and consequential sessions we've had in Florida. What we call the Free State of Florida was something that I helped to build. And we don't want to go backwards. We want to lean in and move forward on a lot of these issues that you talked about in the intro, whether it's affordability, whether it's AI, whether it's protecting our workers. All of these things require a leader who can deliver results, and I've done that.
Fantastic. On your website, you actually talk about the fact that you're running to defend our victories and solve challenges that remain. Can you kind of fill in the gap for our viewers? What do you see as the victories and what are the unresolved challenges that Florida must confront?
Well, some of the victories were going after the collapsing insurance market, people getting double-digit increases year after year. And we went after some of the garbage litigation that was happening. We've seen auto rates come down and with more on the way. Homeowners is at least stabilized, and it's not where I want it to be yet, but at least we're making a progress going in the right direction. There's more to do with home hardening and other things to continue to bring those prices down. And then looking ahead, you mentioned property taxes before. The fundamental problem, as I think you know, Ann, is that incomes have not kept up with the cost of property taxes, with the cost of healthcare, and with the cost of insurance. And so we've got to make sure that Florida is affordable again. I know how to solve those problems. I've done it as Speaker, and I'll do it as governor.
So one of your key reform areas, and this is a really hot topic, Paul, is that property taxes are out of control. And of course, housing is, become really unaffordable. So with all the talk about immediate rollback of property taxes, specifically coming out of the governor's office right now, Governor DeSantis, can you kind of walk us what that would look like from where you're sitting as governor or purportedly to, sit in that chair? What would you do to facilitate that? And how would that look? Is it a complete elimination, or are we just talking about a step down approach, a laddered approach to reduction in property tax?
Well, the governor hasn't released a proposal yet. The House has introduced some proposals, but both what the governor's talked about concerning eliminating homestead property taxes and what is in the House would require a constitutional amendment next November. And even if passed, we would not see that benefit in our wallets until November of 27 when those property tax bills come through. So what I've said, and no one else has said this yet, is let's do something legislatively. We have some constitutional constraints, but this happened back in 06, 07. The legislature ordered a mandatory rollback, which is what I'm calling for, an immediate rollback now before the end of the year or the beginning of next year, so that people can feel that now. We have people losing their homes. We have people, I see them every day, people saying I have to leave the state, or I'm leaving the state because of whether it's insurance or property taxes. And so we must not allow people on fixed income, for example, to lose their homes when they've been Florida residents for 20, 30, 40 years. And so what I'm proposing that's unique is an immediate rollback, and then freeze that for these 2 years while we're getting more long-term relief on the ballot. And so that's what I'm advocating for right now. And then we look at what that long-term picture looks like to make sure we're easing the burden, certainly on long-term residents, easing the burden on first-time home buyers, where you used to buy a home in your 20s or 30s. Now it's your 40s or 50s. We're seeing the American dream choked out, and I'm going to make sure we restore it here in Florida.
You're absolutely right, because many Floridians are really concerned about private equity and institutional investors buying up their homes, driving up the prices. How do you propose to stop that dynamic without creating unintended disincentives for investment or harming the rental market?
Yeah, well, I want to look at the tax code, but basically whatever long-term policy we undertake should benefit homeowners and long-term residents. We don't want to incentivize people moving down from New York City tomorrow to receive that benefit when people have been here for a long, long time paying into the system. And so with respect to private equity, look, what's happening is you see them buying up whole communities and turning everybody into a nation of renters. And I just don't want to see that. I mean, I rented when I was young. We all do it on our way to home ownership. But I want to make sure people have the opportunity to have a stake in society, to have ownership, to have equity. And having private equity come and buy up a bunch of developments means it shrinks that supply for those that want to own a home. And I want to make sure there's plenty of housing for people to own a home. And they can't do that when private equity is crowding everybody else out.
Exactly. When it comes back to the topic of insurance, because of course, property taxes, private equity buying up and driving up home prices, insurance has been a hot button. You mentioned it earlier. Your platform actually cites the ending of the nuclear verdicts, which drive up insurance premiums, reforming litigation financing, stopping the junk lawsuits, expanding home hardening programs, and enforcing insurer accountability and expediting claims payment. Can you walk us through how you would change that system to get the consumer the relief it needs, and not just the nice sounding rhetoric? Because it's a sophisticated scheme that drives all these prices up.
Right. Well, when I was speaker, we focused on the consumer. So we had insurer accountability. They have to pay their claims as fast as they take premiums, and make sure they're doing the right things. And if they don't, they can get hammered. And then at the same time, we got rid of some of the garbage litigation. In Florida, we had 7 or 8% of the population, 7 or 8% of the homeowners' claims. But of the claims that turned to lawsuits, 76% of the entire country's lawsuits in homeowners was right here in Florida. And so we wanted to have a fair process, and that's resulted in the end of the double-digit increases. You see more insurers coming in. There's now a competitive market. I would say to your listeners, if your homeowners is not going down at this point, you should definitely shop it. But we also want to do home hardening grants. So for people that maybe can't get all the way there, it's a match up to $10,000 to get new windows, roof tie downs, things that would harden your home from a hurricane. And it saves on average $1,000 or plus on your premiums for an unhardened home. And it also means that when hurricanes come, all of us benefit, because instead of a $10 billion loss, it's a $5 billion loss. And so as we work towards these things and construction materials, we can have a Florida that is ready for these storms. They're coming. We know they're coming. But it's the man-made part. It's the man-made disaster of litigation and other things that are really driving these companies out of business and driving our rates through the roof. And we're correcting that, but there's more to do.
There's always more to do, and healthcare is something that has been, a focus of yours as of late. I watched you speak at Alfie Oaks Seed to Table in Naples, Florida, about a week ago, and you met with the Stand for Health Freedom organization, which is a very big medical freedom organization down here in South Florida. I know the people that are very involved. And you got a resounding endorsement from that organization, which is phenomenal, from where people who, were really feeling very penalized by COVID and by the egregious mandates that were fully unconstitutional. Your reform agenda calls for insisting Congress to repeal the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, in other words, and returning control to the states, implementing a health, freedom, and wellness initiative, and putting patients in control while reducing costs. That's a big federal state shift. And given the recent reports that Florida could be hard hit if the Affordable Care Act subsidies and coverage change, what would be your first step in Florida as governor to begin that transition? And how would you safeguard against disruption for people already reliant on current coverage?
Well, you're right. We'd have to phase this in. But first of all, the Obamacare mandates were from the same people that gave us COVID lockdowns, the same know-it-alls that want to control every aspect of our health care. And it's like my wife and I just bought an oven, and we got some features on there that probably we'll never use or don't want, but it was the only oven we can purchase. And so we had to pay that extra for that oven. And that's Obamacare. Every one of us is paying more than we should for healthcare because of excessive onerous mandates. The same the group that gave us the COVID mandates, the same folks that have given us other mandates. And so a repeal of Obamacare would allow us to do things at the state level with greater flexibility, more patient control, and as a result, and more free market, as a result, lower cost for each and every Floridian. But you're right, we would want to phase it in carefully and make sure that people are not dislocated. Nobody wants, a dramatic shift where they lose their health insurance. We're not going to do that. We're going to make sure, and then President Trump has talked about taking that money and shifting it down so that people can have that money and shop it themselves. If we did that and we had a truly free market competitive system, I promise you, we would have lower costs than what Obamacare is delivering us. Obamacare is basically just the kind of the anteroom to full-on socialism in healthcare, and it will cost more and more, and we should not be subsidizing the failure of Obamacare.
I always point to the Constitution, Paul. I ask, show me in the Constitution where the government was supposed to provide us health care under Article 1, Section 8, and nobody can ever do that. So we've gone so far and strayed from that. But then again, you could also say that about education, right? Which is why I believe President Trump wants to basically dismantle the Department of Education and is charged his secretary with doing so, Linda McMahon. If she does a good job, according to the president, she'll be out of a job. We haven't seen that fully yet, but I'm still hopeful we will. And on that note, on education, you've actually enumerated a clear agenda. No in-state tuition increases, protect universal school choice scholarships, end admissions for international students from adversarial nations like China, and require universities to identify and adjust degree programs that could be disrupted or destroyed by artificial intelligence so that all degrees provide a path to high quality jobs. This is very exciting from where I'm sitting. So can we take these one at a time? First of all, no tuition increases. How will you ensure that colleges and universities keep costs down and maintain quality?
Well, we've done it for several years now. We're ranked number one in the nation in higher ed, in part because we have a reasonable price for people to get a college education. That's for in-state students. Now, I think out-of-state students could pay more, and certainly international students could pay more than they're paying right now. They're getting great value already. So letting that slide up to make sure we can continue to hold the line for people who have grown up here in the state of Florida. And my campaign is built around Florida first. And that's what we're going to do, is make sure we're taking care of Florida girls and boys who want to go and get a great degree and hold those tuition rates steady. Jump to AI and say that, we've got to make sure that when a kid starts a degree as a freshman, that the job that they want is not eliminated by the time they graduate. And we see that with a graphic design degree, for example, where now you can go on to ChatGPT and ask it to give you a logo with a dog drinking a beer for your bar or whatever what business you're starting. And so I think it really is necessary for our universities to be more thoughtful and have a greater stake in making sure that those students graduate with a degree that matters. And we have to look at AI, we have to look at our foreign students and make sure we're not eliminating opportunities for Florida residents.
So the universal school choice scholarships that you support, are basically a major shift in how we fund and think about K through 12 education. Critics argue it could actually erode public schools. How do you respond to that? And how will you ensure public schools continue to be strong while rolling out broader choice?
Well, I'm a public school kid. My mom was a public school teacher. I love our public schools. We want them to be the best in the country. We want every child, no matter where they are, if it's a traditional public school, charter, private, homeschool, to get a world-class education. So we start with that. But universal choice is really just about a free market competition. Every business has an entrance and an exit. If you're doing a great job, people will be hitting the entrances. If you're doing a terrible job, people will want to hit the exits, and we should allow them out the door. This is not the Hotel California, and we have some schools oftentimes in our inner cities that are just failing kids, and we want to give them an opportunity to opt out of that and find the school that best fits their needs. So that competition, innovation, but also values. We see during COVID, you teach your kids something at home and they go to school, you get to drop them off at school and they teach them the exact opposite, to hold everything you teach them at home in contempt. And so this also allows people to send their child to a Christian school or faith-based school if they so choose. And universal choice is not the be-all, end-all, but it is advancing the cause of raising the bar for all of our schools. But again, we want to make sure we're taking care of our public schools as well, and we'll do that while I'm governor.
Great. As far as your agenda of no new taxes or fees, regulatory reforms to unleash small business hirings, protect Florida's workers by ending H-1B visa hires for state employees and procurement, ending H-1B abuse at the federal level in support of stronger border enforcement. To start, I have to say many Floridians already have a job first climate down here because we are, really the free state, and we have been for quite some time. But given Florida's small business agenda for 2025 and for its regulatory reform model of the NFIB, Small Business Association, what fresh regulatory reforms will you implement to visibly improve wages and job quality and not just job quantity?
Well, I like the 1 in, 2 out concept. If there's going to be a new state regulation, that we look to eliminate 2 or more. There's a lot of things that get built in that no longer apply in a 2025 economy that may have gotten into the code, back in the 60s or 70s or 80s, and nobody can understand why. And so we always need to be on the hunt for things that just don't make sense. I was talking to somebody today about the fact that it shouldn't take longer to get a permit to build a building than it does to construct that building, which raises costs for people, whether it's the home ownership, this type of thing. And so we need to make sure we're looking at ways to do things better, faster, cheaper, while maintaining quality and maintaining safety, obviously. But regulations that don't belong in that bucket of life safety, we need to make sure that they make common sense in today's economy and release, especially small businesses that give the lion's share of jobs. We want to make sure men and women that want to start their own business, live their dream, provide for their families, and create American jobs can do so. And that means we do not allow in our state level or for state procurement these H-1B visas. And I think that's important that we take a bit of a pause and we have so much illegal immigration to deal with right now. We do not want other people competing for jobs with Florida workers. And then you have AI on top of that. So I think it's really critical that we protect American workers and Florida workers, and I'll do that as governor.
Great. As far as the border enforcement's concerned and the workforce, they're basically tied together. We saw Elon Musk threaten President Trump going to war over the H-1B visa issue. So how do you see the relationship between immigration, policy, border enforcement, and Florida's job market?
Well, as governor, I'll be a good partner for the president to make sure we're continuing to enforce our border. We're exiting people that do not need to be in the country and making sure that happens seamlessly here in the state of Florida, so that those people are not competing with Florida workers. But it also is incumbent on us to continue to address these other threats like AI that is going to potentially eliminate jobs and be ahead of that. Now, at the federal level, I would encourage the federal government to look at all of these visas and say, look, we're not going to allow for immigration that's going to directly compete with American workers. I'm tired of hearing stories about American workers training foreign workers only to be fired and replaced by those workers. And so I do think there's been rampant abuse, and we need to make sure that's drawn back at the federal level. They have to do that Congress needs to act, and they've done some good things, since President Trump has been in office, but there's a lot more that they need to do to help us at the state level. But as governor, I'll do what I can do by restricting the use of those visas for any state employment or any contract with the state government, to not allow those to be part of that contract.
All right, fair enough. Now, closing here, you're not the only horse in the race. Byron Donalds has been endorsed by President Trump. He is running for governor. He's a congressman down here in Southwest Florida. He does have some issues, actually more than a few issues, I'd have to say, but these are ones that come to mind with respect to his voting record, or should we say his lack of voting record, meaning he doesn't show up consistently to vote. And from where I'm sitting, if you're going to be in the position of governing, you must show up to do your job. Now, this is just my opinion, but I want to find out from you where you see yourself stacking up with respect to voting record, but, in terms of the experience to get the job done, since he is the Republican candidate running against you in the primary.
Well, Congress is a full-time job. Mine was a part-time job. They called it as Speaker of the Florida House, but I was there every day. We had what they called the session of the century. As a veteran, I'm going to focus on the mission. There's too much ego, arrogance, and politics, and people that don't show up for work should not be auditioning to lead the organization. And this position of governor is a very important leadership role. And so what I would say is, look at my record. I've been in leadership under pressure since I was age 23 in the first of two wars, and have had those positions of trust all the way through as Speaker of the House. I'm going to be focused on what Floridians care about, putting Florida first. It's about we, it's not about me. And so if you're not showing up for work, then I can't see how you should get a promotion into a very important job where you have to be ready to lead on day one and take whatever comes our way. I'm ready.
Right. Well, Paul Renner, thank you so much. I know that you've got another meeting you've got to get to in about 8 minutes, so I'm trying to be mindful of your time and get in as much as possible. I want to let you know personally, I am endorsing you for governor of Florida. I think the experience you bring, I think the fact that you like to show up and vote occasionally or when you're supposed to is probably pretty compelling. But I have to say your position on property tax, and which is a very big hot button for me because we pay a lot of property tax here in Florida, and we don't seem to get a lot for it, which is the problem. We don't see where the money is going that's making a big difference. So I think, with the stepped approach in which you're taking is methodical, it makes sense, and it addresses the fact that property tax, frankly, shouldn't be a thing for anybody. And I think Florida can lead the country with that ballot initiative and with the approach that you're talking about in a phased approach. So Paul, God bless you. Thank you for your time today. And we will watch you closely, and hopefully you'll come back on.
I'm honored to have your support, and I'll come back on anytime. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you. Okay, well, you heard it from the horse's mouth, Paul Renner, and yours truly. I'm endorsing this man because I believe in what he stands for. It's very crisp. It's very clean. He's thought through some very significant issues, and it was a very compelling conversation. He brought a lot of candor to the conversation, but he wasn't just shooting from the hip. And as we have heard tonight, we are at the crossroads, Florida. And while the state has achieved many conservative victories, the burdens on families remain very real. Home costs, insurance premiums, healthcare uncertainty, education, transformations, and the future of work. The questions are clear. Who will lead with both conviction and results? Who has the track record of turning ideas into law, protecting liberty while delivering affordability and opportunity? Paul Renner offered us a roadmap tonight, grounded in his military service, prosecutorial background, and legislative leadership. But as you at home decide which vision resonates, keep this in mind. Reform isn't about slogans. It's about implementation. It's about the homeowner seeing real tax relief, the insured homeowner not getting creamed by rising premiums, the parent choosing the best school for their child, the worker getting a good wage because the state freed the job market, the patient having true health freedom. If Florida is to remain the free state, then the next governor must protect what we've built and boldly tackle what's still broken. We're going to continue to monitor the issues and hold leadership accountable. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Ann Vandersteel, and this is Steel News. Stay tuned because I'm going to drop right now what I consider to be a very compelling campaign video.
The Persian Gulf, pitch black. Mines hidden just beneath the surface. One wrong turn and American forces would be lost. Just 23 years old, Paul Renner was the one trusted to lead. Paul's faith gave him the courage to fulfill his mission. A minister's son, he knew true strength comes from God. Paul bravely served, navigating through the danger and protecting America. Years later, Paul Renner was called to lead again, this time in Afghanistan. As a military intelligence officer, he commanded a unit to disrupt terrorist networks. The responsibility, enormous. The mission, critical. The outcome, victory. Returning home, Renner's call to service was just beginning. Now, battling in the courtroom as a prosecutor, Paul sent violent criminals to prison and gave justice to their victims. When Paul's next opportunity to serve arrived, again, he answered the call. Running and winning a seat in the Florida legislature and earning the trust of his colleagues to become Speaker of the House. Ultimately, one of the most consequential legislative leaders in Florida's history.
The fight for freedom, common sense, and values we share is an urgent battle. Everything is at stake. You gave us a chance, and we made it happen.
Paul Renner's accomplishments? Impressive. Tax cuts and a balanced budget. Lawsuit abuse tackled head-on to bring insurance costs down. Universal school choice and parents' rights. Life defended. Immigration laws strengthened. And elections protected. DEI canceled. And liberal craziness brought to an end.
Our state is the envy of the nation, but we must remain diligent by defending the progress we made and face our problems head-on.
Speaker Paul Renner and Governor Ron DeSantis brought freedom and common sense back to Florida. Protecting their accomplishments will be no small feat. And President Trump is fighting every day. Paul Renner will stand strong with him to make America great again. Paul Renner is the only candidate for governor who has delivered results, and he did it with character, determination, and courage. No political theater, no fabricated hype for clicks and views, just results.
The left will do everything they can to overturn what we've accomplished, and I will defend it with everything I have. The question is simple. Who do we trust to defend our conservative wins and take on the challenges that still exist?
Paul Renner is a serious leader we can trust. Where others talk, he's delivered. Renner is battle-tested, rock solid, ready to lead.